Hi there, in this video I'm going to show how iconik is able to archive to a P5 server, which we have down here in my diagram, using the S3 interface. So I'm going to start with a little bit of whiteboard and then I'm going to show you the configuration and use of this integration on the screen. So what we have is a iconik installation in the cloud where I'm able to manage my assets, and then down here on premise we've got some LTO tape hardware that we want to archive to, and to facilitate that we've got the P5 server running on a host just here. And one of the things that the P5 server is able to do is to create a S3 bucket. So here's our S3 bucket, and the S3 bucket is published via the IP of this server host here. So if this is opened up through the firewall, then this will be a publicly accessible S3 interface that iconik can then connect to and archive data to. So the way that this works is that in iconik I might have a set of assets which are currently stored in cloud storage, and I might decide that this is a completed project that I want to archive. And down here I have an LTO tape library with tapes in it that I want to archive to, and of course the LTO storage is going to be very low cost and very long life compared to cost of cloud storage, generally speaking. So what we can do in iconik is we can add the ability to archive, and we can configure some S3 storage, an S3 target in iconik that we want to archive to. And the configuration of this basically involves you need the IP address or the DNS name of this endpoint over here. You need the credentials to access a bucket, plus the name of the bucket. And with that set up, we'll be able to select these assets and indicate that we want to archive them to our P5 server. They will then be transmitted to the bucket using the standard S3 protocol. So those three assets will now be in the P5 hosted bucket down here. And then what P5 does is at intervals, either when there is some quiet time where nothing's arriving or based on a timer, these will be archived to LTO. So what we have in the Archiware configuration is something called a storage pool, which is one or more tapes that you want to archive to. So you configure your storage pool with a bunch of tapes. So in here there will be tapes sitting in the library, and then P5 will write to the first tape and then fill a tape, write to the second tape. All of that is automated. So this will happen. The storage class of these individual objects will change from being standard, indicating that they are immediately available to the S3 client requesting them. They will change from standard to Glacier, indicating that they are now on a storage which requires some time in order to pull them back and make them online again. So then iconik knows, because these objects have the Glacier storage class down here, that it needs to make a restore request and then wait a while before those objects are available. So part of the archiving process within iconik could be that the links to the iconik cloud storage are deleted, so that those objects are no longer in their full form available from the iconik storage, so you would just be able to see the proxies. But if you request to restore these objects, the restore request will be made, the data will come back from tape, it'll become online in the S3 bucket, and they'll be transmitted back up, and the original cloud storage can be repopulated so that those assets are again stored in the cloud storage, and so the full size, the original versions of those assets are available again to work with. So with that brief explanation out of the way, let's go look at what I've talked about here in terms of what we see on the screen. Okay, so let's see how this works. Here is my iconik interface. I've got a collection here called P5 Archive Test. In this folder, I've got a bunch of movie CCTV files. If I get an info on this folder, you can see there's 2 gigs here, so not a lot. But I want to archive this stuff off to tape. So if we look at one of these files, you can see that currently the original file is being stored in this iconik Google Cloud storage. Plus there's the proxy, which is also stored in the Google Cloud service. So what we want to do here is get the original off of my this Google storage. I want to put it on tape, and I've got a tape library on premise that I want to use for that purpose. And in order to do that, I need to do some configuration inside of Archiware. So here we have Archiware P5's web admin interface. We're in the archive section here. Now I have got some storage configured, and in order for this demo to be nice and nippy and not involve me having a physical tape library here, I've set up something called container storage inside of P5, which is like a virtual tape library. Now this will be quick in order to show you how this works, but we could just as easily have a tape library and provide the storage pool on LTO tapes. So I just want to make that clear. I'm not actually using tape, but this would work just fine with tape. So with that said, I'm going to go down here to S3 Object Archive, which is where we publish a bucket via the S3 protocol, and then we'll be able to connect to that from iconik. So let's make a new bucket, and I'm going to call this bucket iconik, since I don't already have one with that name. And importantly, part of the publishing a bucket is that we have to provide a staging area, which is space on disk storage where objects uploaded to us are initially going to be stored until they are written to tape and then removed from that staging storage. So you can think of it as being like a temporary storage that is flushed to the tape device. And when we flush to that tape device is all configurable via some options that we'll look at in a moment. But initially I just need to browse inside of my Linux machine, which is what I'm using for this test, and I'm just going to create a folder here called S3 Object Iconik Test, and then I will choose that folder, which is currently empty, as my staging storage. In reality, in a production environment, you'd need to provide a decent chunk of storage here so that we can receive many objects before we need to start writing to tape, and so that when we are writing to tape we can continue to receive objects. The second thing that we have to choose here is the storage pool. So I'm choosing that pool that I already alluded to. If I had a bunch of 20 tapes in a library, that could also be provided as a pool with a different name, and I would choose that instead. Once I apply these two bits of configuration, I will get my secret access key here, and by clicking the little copy icon I can take a copy of that. So I'm just copying that off screen to a text file, and I'll do the same here with my secret access key. So these are the two pieces of kind of credentials information that iconik is going to need, along with the bucket name, which is iconik. So I'll apply all of that, and then I can close it, and now we have something called iconik, bucket called iconik. And then back in iconik I can go to my admin panel, I can go to my storages, and I can add a new storage, and the name that I'm going to give this is going to be iconik P5 Archive. And I'm going to use this storage for the purposes of archiving, and the kind of storage is going to be Amazon S3, because we're compatible with Amazon S3 Deep Archive Glacier storage. So I need that access key, secret key and bucket that we saw a moment ago. So the bucket name, you'll remember, was iconik. The copy paste job now for the access key and the secret key goes in there. The path I can leave blank. I need to supply a region, even though, and what was the default? US East 1, US East 1. I need to provide a region because otherwise we'll get an error back from iconik. But the endpoint is going to be the public IP or DNS name of my P5 server. So my P5 server is running in a cloud Linux instance, just so that it's easy to access from the web. And I actually have a self-signed certificate that comes as part of a default P5 installation. So I'm going to use HTTP so that we don't get errors from iconik about my self-signed certificate. So for testing, you can use an HTTP endpoint in iconik, and the default port for HTTP with P5 is 8000. If this was the HTTPS port, it would be 8443. But 8000 is the port that I can use to connect to my P5 server. And then down here, I'm going to enable read, write, delete for permissions to this bucket. And then I can apply that and just wait a moment whilst P5 connects up to the S3 endpoint. And then it should come back and tell us that all is well. And with that done, I can see my iconik, where did I put it? Iconik P5 Archive storage shows up in the list of targets for archiving assets to. So if I go back to my P5 archive test collection, we could then decide that we want to archive all of these assets. I can do that via the little contextual menu against the collection. So I'll choose Archive. I will choose iconik P5 Archive as my target storage. The iconik files, Google Cloud Storage, will be the preferred source. These are all within this storage, so there's no real need to specify a preference. We'll delete the original assets from the Google Cloud Storage after archiving, and we need to allow transfer through iconik since we're coming from cloud storage and going out to external storage as well. So then we hit the archive button and it tells us that the collection will be archived. So at this point, iconik will start transmitting these files to the P5 archive server, and they will land in that staging area. And then we'll have to wait a little while. 10 minutes is the default before P5 will run an archive task to flush that data to tape. You can see the icons against these assets now show that the asset is going offline and is archived. And if we look at the detail on one of these, we can see that there is an additional entry showing up here indicating that this asset has been archived. So as far as iconik is concerned, these have been transferred to the archive storage. Inside of our P5 server, back in this tab, we can view the job monitor window, which will run a job, an archive job, in a few minutes that will take those assets out of the staging area, put them on tape, and then the staging area will be cleared so that they're no longer on disk. At that point, we can then restore these objects, these files within iconik. We can request that they come back onto the Google Cloud Storage, and so we'll do that in just a minute. So we're just going to wait until our job runs here. So we can see our S3 archive job running there. Should archive about 2 gigabytes, which represents those media files that we archived. In the case of tape, it would tell us that it would be moving tapes from slots into drives, writing tapes. We will replace one tape with the next as needed, and we'll span large files across tapes to most effectively and economically use that LTO tape storage. So there we go, our S3 archive job is completed, and our data is now safely on tape. So if I go back to my iconik, I can, in the admin interface, actually view the job logs, and we can see that the archive of a collection of files is finished. And if I was to drill into the sub-jobs, I'd be able to see each file being archived separately. So that all worked fine. Those files are now offline, so we don't need to worry about them. But later on, if we decided that we wanted to bring some of these files back from our archive, from our tape, then I could go back here. I could choose some of these files. Let's just choose 8 and choose to restore 8 files. I'm going to choose my Google Cloud Storage as the destination and allow the transfer to go through iconik in the middle, and we hit the restore. So what will happen is this will cause a restore job to run inside of P5, where we'll know which tapes were required to perform this recovery. There's a two-step process from the perspective of iconik, in the same way that Google's deep archive storage requires some time between requesting a file and being able to download that file. The same applies with Archiware. So the requests have been made, but there will be a delay before these are pulled back from tape and written back into the cache storage, where iconik will be able to pull them out of using the S3 protocol. So again, we need to wait a little while. Meanwhile, we can go to the jobs, and we can see there's a restore for multiple assets sitting there. It's started, but it's yet to progress. If we look at sub-jobs, we'll see that for each of the media files, there's 2 steps. So the restore from Glacier call has been put in to the S3 server. So that's started, but we're waiting for the files to come back so that we can download them. So iconik will keep checking that the files have come back online, and when they have, it'll download them, and we'll know that that's happening because we'll see a restore job running inside of P5, indicating that those files have been recovered from tape and are available back in the staging area storage to be downloaded. But remember, from the perspective of iconik, all of this stuff is just taking place as interactions with this remote S3 bucket, which behaves the same way as an Amazon Web Services deep archive bucket. So we behave exactly the same way. It's just that this allows your customers to use on-prem tape instead of cloud storage to get the cheapest cost per terabyte. So there we can see the restore jobs now running. And it's restoring those 8 files that we requested. Those files are now back online. And if we flick back to the jobs view in iconik, we can see iconik is picking up those files one by one. And if we go back to the file view for the P5 archive test folder, you can see some of these aren't yet showing that they've been restored, but as we refresh this view, we can see that the 8 files at the top no longer have the little orange symbol indicating that the asset is offline, so these ones are now back online again with the original file in the Google Cloud Storage. So that's a quick illustration of the round trip from iconik into P5's LTO storage via the S3 interface. So I hope that was all really clear. Thanks for your time. Thanks for watching.